What happens when a man who fled war-torn Syria, carrying nothing but hope for his family's future, finds himself standing before an American judge over a simple parking ticket? The answer reveals everything about the difference between justice and compassion. It was a typical Tuesday morning in Providence, Rhode Island. The municipal courthouse buzzed with its usual rhythm of cases, fines, and legal proceedings. Traffic violations, parking disputes, minor infractions, the bread and butter of local justice. But in courtroom 6A, something extraordinary was about to unfold that would remind everyone present why Judge Frank Caprio had earned the title America's Kindest Judge. The man standing before the bench that morning was Ahmad Hassan, a 34-year-old refugee who had arrived in America just 8 months earlier. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched a folder of documents, some in Arabic, others hastily translated into English. His story was one of incredible hardship. He had fled Damascus with his wife and 2 young children after their neighborhood was destroyed in the ongoing conflict. They had spent 3 years in a refugee camp in Jordan before finally being approved for resettlement in the United States. Ahmad's English was limited but improving. He worked 2 jobs, one at a local restaurant washing dishes, another cleaning offices at night. Every dollar mattered. His family lived in a small apartment provided by a resettlement agency, and he was determined to build a new life for his children, ages 4 and 7, who had known nothing but uncertainty and fear for most of their young lives. The parking ticket seemed minor, a $50 fine for parking in a 2-hour zone for 3 hours while he attended an English class at the community center. But for Ahmad, that $50 represented nearly a full day's wages, money desperately needed for his family's basic necessities. He had come to court not to fight the ticket, but to ask if he could pay it in installments, maybe $10 per month. Judge Caprio sat behind the bench with his characteristic gentle demeanor. At 84 years old, he had presided over thousands of cases, but he never lost sight of the human being standing before him. His courtroom wasn't just about law. It was about understanding, dignity, and finding solutions that served both justice and humanity. The interpreter, Maria Santos, stood ready to help bridge any language barriers. The court clerk shuffled papers routinely, expecting another quick resolution. The few observers in the gallery, mostly people waiting for their own cases, barely looked up from their phones. But something in Ahmad's posture, the way he carefully arranged his documents, the obvious anxiety mixed with determination in his eyes, caught Judge Caprio's attention immediately. This wasn't just another parking ticket case. This was a story waiting to be heard. As Ahmad approached the podium, Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, his expression softening. He had developed an instinct over decades on the bench, an ability to sense when someone needed more than just legal proceedings, when they needed understanding, compassion, and hope. "Good morning," Judge Caprio said gently, his voice carrying the warmth that had made him beloved far beyond Providence. "Please tell me your name and why you're here today." Ahmad cleared his throat, his voice barely above a whisper as he began to explain his situation through the interpreter. But Judge Caprio held up a gentle hand, encouraging Ahmad to speak directly in whatever English he could manage, assuring him that they would work together to understand each other. The courtroom fell into an unusual quiet. Unlike the typical rapid-fire processing of traffic cases, something different was happening here. Judge Caprio wasn't looking at his docket or rushing to the next case. He was looking at Ahmad, really looking at him, with the kind of attention that said, "Your story matters. You matter." The parking ticket, case #2019 MV 4847, involved a white Honda Civic registered to Ahmad Hassan. The violation occurred on Federal Hill, outside the community center where English classes were held every Tuesday and Thursday morning. The facts were straightforward. Car parked at 9:30 a.m., ticket issued at 12:45 p.m. 3 hours and 15 minutes in a 2-hour zone. But Judge Caprio had learned long ago that facts alone never told the whole story. Behind every case was a human being with circumstances, challenges, and dreams. His approach had always been to listen first, understand second, and only then decide what justice truly required. As Ahmad began to speak, his voice gaining strength despite the language barrier, the entire courtroom seemed to lean in. The clerk stopped shuffling papers. The court reporter's fingers slowed on her stenotype machine. Even the bailiff, who had seen it all in his 20 years of service, found himself drawn into this moment. No one expected what Judge Caprio would say next, but everyone sensed they were about to witness something special. A reminder of what justice could look like when tempered with wisdom, compassion, and an understanding that sometimes the most important thing a court can offer isn't punishment, but hope. Judge Caprio set down his gavel and removed his reading glasses, giving Ahmad his complete attention. "Please," he said with characteristic gentleness, "tell me about yourself. How long have you been in America?" Through a combination of careful English and the interpreter's assistance, Ahmad's story began to unfold. He spoke of Damascus, the city he had loved and lost. He described the morning when bombs fell on his neighborhood, how he had grabbed his children from their beds and run with his wife through streets filled with smoke and screaming. The family photo he kept in his wallet showed a different life. Ahmad in a business suit, outside his small electronics repair shop, his children playing in a garden behind their modest but comfortable home. "I was, how you say, businessman in Syria," Ahmad explained, his voice growing stronger as Judge Caprio nodded encouragingly. "I fix computers, phones, good life before war." He paused, struggling with the words to describe the indescribable. Everything gone, shop, house, neighbors, friends, everything. The courtroom had grown completely silent. Even the usual sounds from the hallway seemed muted as Ahmad continued his story. Judge Caprio had handled thousands of cases involving people facing financial hardship. But there was something particularly moving about this man's quiet dignity in the face of such overwhelming loss. Ahmad explained how they had spent 3 long years in the Zayatari refugee camp in Jordan. His children, Layla and Omar, had learned to sleep through the sounds of desperation that echoed through the camp each night. His wife, Fatima, had taught other refugee children basic math and Arabic to keep their minds active and hopeful. Ahmad had used his technical skills to repair the few electronic devices that made their way into the camp, often working by candlelight. "My children," Ahmad said, his voice thick with emotion. "They ask me, 'Baba, when we go home?' I tell them, we make new home. America is new home now." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, embarrassed by his tears, but unable to stop them. Judge Caprio's own eyes had moistened. In his decades on the bench, he had learned that true justice required seeing the whole person, not just their infraction. Most judges would have processed this parking ticket in under 2 minutes, read the violation, assess the fine, next case. But Judge Caprio understood that his courtroom could be a place of healing, not just punishment. "Tell me about that day," Judge Caprio said gently. "The day you got the parking ticket. What were you doing at the community center?" Ahmad's face brightened slightly. "English class," he said proudly. "I go 2 days every week. Very important for me to learn. I want to speak good English for my children, for job interviews, for to be good American citizen." He explained how he had been running late that morning because Omar had been sick the night before, and by the time he found a parking space, the class had already started. "The teacher, Mrs. Johnson, she very kind. She stay after class to help me with difficult words. I practice saying opportunity and responsibility many times." Ahmad smiled at the memory. "Important words in America, yes?" Judge Caprio nodded, touched by the man's earnest desire to integrate and succeed. Ahmad continued, explaining how he had lost track of time because Mrs. Johnson was helping him fill out job applications. He had been applying for a position at a local auto repair shop, work that would use his mechanical skills and pay better than his current jobs. "I work very hard, Your Honor," Ahmad said, using the formal address he had learned was proper. "Restaurant job in morning, cleaning office at night. My wife, she take care of children, but she want to work too and her English better. We save money for better apartment, for children's college one day." The parking fine represented more than just money to Ahmad's family. It was groceries for a week, or the small toys he had promised to buy his children, or the English textbooks Fatima needed for her own studies. Every expense was carefully calculated in their household budget, written in Arabic numerals in a small notebook Ahmad kept in his shirt pocket. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, processing not just the facts of the case, but the profound human story behind them. Here was a man who had lost everything: his home, his business, his country, yet remained focused on building a better future for his family. He wasn't asking for charity or making excuses. He was simply asking for understanding and perhaps a payment plan that wouldn't force his family to choose between the fine and their basic needs. The judge looked at the parking ticket again, then at Ahmad's carefully organized folder of documents. There were certificates from his English classes, job applications, immunization records for his children, and a letter from their caseworker at the resettlement agency praising Ahmad's dedication to his family and his community integration efforts. Most striking was a hand-drawn picture from his daughter Layla, showing a stick figure family standing in front of an American flag with the words, "Thank you, America," written in careful child's handwriting. Ahmad had brought it as a reminder of what this new life meant to his family. Judge Caprio knew that what happened next would send a message far beyond this courtroom about how America treats those who come seeking refuge, about the difference between justice and compassion, and about the power of seeing the humanity in every person who stands before the law. Judge Caprio set the parking ticket aside and looked directly into Ahmad's eyes. The courtroom held its breath, sensing that something extraordinary was about to unfold. The usual rhythm of municipal court, quick decisions, processed fines, next case, had given way to something deeper, more meaningful. "Ahmad," Judge Caprio said, his voice carrying decades of wisdom and compassion, "I want you to know that I've heard your story, and I want to tell you something important." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "You are not just a case number in my courtroom. You are a human being who has shown incredible courage and determination." The interpreter translated, and Ahmad's eyes widened with surprise. He had expected to plead for a payment plan, to apologize for his violation, and to leave with a lighter wallet. He hadn't expected this level of personal attention from an American judge. Judge Caprio continued, his voice growing stronger with emotion. "You lost everything, your home, your business, your country, yet you're here, working 2 jobs, learning English, trying to build a better life for your children. That tells me more about your character than any parking violation ever could." The courtroom clerk, Janet Morrison, who had worked with Judge Caprio for 15 years, felt tears forming in her eyes. She had seen him show compassion countless times, but this moment felt different, more profound. The bailiff, typically focused on maintaining order and security, found himself completely absorbed in the judge's words. "Now about this parking ticket," Judge Caprio said, picking up the citation. "You were at English class, trying to improve yourself so you can better provide for your family and contribute to your new community. You lost track of time because you were working hard to learn, to grow, to become the American citizen you dream of being." Ahmad nodded, not fully understanding where this was leading, but sensing the judge's kindness in every word. Judge Caprio stood up from his bench, something he rarely did during proceedings. The gesture commanded even more attention from everyone present. "In my 40 years as a judge, I have learned that true justice isn't always found in the strict application of rules. Sometimes it's found in understanding the circumstances that bring people before me." He walked around to the front of his bench, closer to Ahmad, breaking down the formal barrier between judge and defendant. "Your parking violation occurred because you were doing something admirable, improving yourself through education. You weren't shopping or running personal errands. You were investing in your future and your family's future." The judge's voice took on a tone of quiet authority, mixed with warmth. "But more importantly, Ahmad, I want you to understand something about America. This country was built by people like you. People who came here with nothing but hope, who worked multiple jobs, who sacrificed for their children's future, who believed in the American dream even when it seemed impossible to achieve." Ahmad's eyes filled with tears as the interpreter conveyed these words. He had never expected such recognition, such validation of his struggle and his dreams. Judge Caprio returned to his bench and picked up his gavel, but instead of using it to close the case with a fine, he made an announcement that would echo far beyond that courtroom. "Ahmad Hassan, I am dismissing this parking ticket. You owe nothing to this court." A collective gasp arose from the gallery. The court reporter's fingers froze over her keys. Even the interpreter paused, wondering if she had heard correctly. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he continued, "I want to do something else." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out his personal checkbook. "You mentioned that you're applying for a job at an auto repair shop. I want to help you get some work clothes and tools you might need." The judge wrote out a personal check for $200, an amount that represented far more than the dismissed parking fine. He stood again and walked over to Ahmad, who was now openly weeping. "This is not charity," Judge Caprio said firmly but kindly. "This is one American helping another American build a better life. You are my neighbor now, part of my community, and I want to see you succeed." Ahmad's hands shook as he accepted the check. Through his tears he managed to say, "Your Honor, I cannot. This is too much kindness." Judge Caprio placed a gentle hand on Ahmad's shoulder. "Ahmad, when I was young, my own grandfather came to America from Italy with nothing in his pockets and hope in his heart, just like you. Someone helped him along the way, and that kindness changed our family story forever. Today, I'm passing that kindness forward." The courtroom erupted in spontaneous applause. Court officers, waiting defendants, clerks, and observers, everyone was moved by what they had witnessed. This wasn't just about a dismissed parking ticket. It was about the very best of what America could be. Ahmad embraced Judge Caprio, cultural barriers dissolving in the face of pure human compassion. "Thank you," he whispered in English, then repeated it in Arabic, "Shukran, shukran." As Ahmad walked toward the exit, still clutching the check and his dismissed ticket, Judge Caprio called out one final message. "Ahmad, when your children are older and they ask you what America is really like, I hope you'll remember this day and tell them that America is a place where people care about each other, where hard work is rewarded, and where everyone deserves a chance to build a better life." The moment would later be broadcast around the world, but for everyone in that courtroom that Tuesday morning, it was simply a reminder of what justice looks like when it's guided by compassion, wisdom, and an understanding that we are all, in our own ways, seeking hope and a chance at a better tomorrow. 3 months after that remarkable day in court, Ahmad Hassan returned to Judge Caprio's courtroom, not as a defendant, but as a visitor bringing wonderful news. He had gotten the job at the auto repair shop, his English had improved dramatically, and his family had moved into a better apartment. Most importantly, he wanted to thank the judge who had shown him what American compassion could look like. This transformation wasn't unusual in Judge Caprio's world. Throughout his extraordinary career, he had touched thousands of lives with his unique approach to justice, one that recognized that behind every citation, every violation, every case that came before his bench was a human being deserving of dignity and understanding. Judge Caprio's philosophy was beautifully simple, yet profoundly revolutionary. Punishment without compassion achieves little, but justice tempered with mercy can change lives. He understood that his courtroom wasn't just a place where fines were assessed and penalties imposed. It was a place where hope could be restored, where second chances could be given, and where the very best of human nature could shine through the machinery of law. The story of Ahmad Hassan became one of hundreds that illustrated Judge Caprio's approach to justice. There was the elderly woman who couldn't afford her parking tickets because she was caring for her disabled grandson. He dismissed her fines and connected her with social services. The young veteran struggling with PTSD who had accumulated multiple citations. Judge Caprio helped him find counseling and job training. The single mother who missed court because her child was hospitalized, he rescheduled her case and later visited the child in the hospital. Each case revealed the same fundamental principle that guided Judge Caprio throughout his career: that true justice requires seeing the whole person, understanding their circumstances, and finding solutions that serve both the law and humanity. He never abandoned his responsibility to uphold legal standards, but he wielded that responsibility with wisdom, creativity, and an unshakable belief in people's capacity for growth and redemption. Judge Caprio's impact extended far beyond his Providence courtroom. Videos of his compassionate decisions spread across social media, inspiring millions of people worldwide. He received letters from judges in other countries asking for advice on how to incorporate more humanity into their legal proceedings. Law schools began using his cases as examples of how judicial discretion could be exercised with both firmness and kindness. But perhaps the most significant aspect of Judge Caprio's legacy was how he changed people's relationship with the justice system itself. For many, courts represent intimidation, confusion, and punishment. Judge Caprio transformed his courtroom into a place where people felt heard, respected, and valued. He proved that the law could be both just and kind, that accountability could coexist with compassion. His approach wasn't about being lenient or avoiding consequences when they were necessary. Judge Caprio held people accountable for their actions, but he did so in a way that built them up rather than tearing them down. He understood that lasting behavioral change comes not from fear of punishment, but from feeling valued and supported by one's community. The ripple effects of his compassion were immeasurable. Ahmad Hassan, inspired by the kindness shown to him, began volunteering with a local refugee resettlement organization, helping other families navigate their new lives in America. He often told his story as a way of encouraging other newcomers that America, despite its challenges, could indeed be a land of opportunity and compassion. Judge Caprio's legacy reminds us that in our increasingly divided and often harsh world, small acts of kindness can have profound impacts. His courtroom became a beacon of hope, proving that institutions designed for justice can also be sources of healing, encouragement, and human connection. When Judge Caprio finally retired after 4 decades on the bench, the Providence community held a celebration attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched. Former defendants, their families, court staff, fellow judges, and community members gathered to honor a man who had shown them that justice and mercy were not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of a more perfect system. His retirement speech was characteristically humble and focused on others. He spoke about the privilege of serving his community, the lessons he had learned from every person who stood before his bench, and his hope that the compassion he had tried to show would inspire others to find ways to make their own corners of the world a little kinder. Judge Frank Caprio reminded us that justice isn't only about laws and penalties, it's about humanity, dignity, and the recognition that we all deserve second chances and the opportunity to build better lives. In a world that often seems to emphasize punishment over rehabilitation, division over unity, and judgment over understanding, his example stands as a powerful reminder of what we can accomplish when we lead with our hearts, while still honoring our responsibilities. His legacy lives on in every judge who chooses compassion over indifference, in every official who sees the person behind the case, and in every one of us who has the opportunity to show kindness to someone facing their own struggles. Judge Caprio showed us that true justice has always been about more than following rules. It's about honoring the humanity in every person who seeks it. Thank you for watching this tribute to Judge Frank Caprio. If his story touched you, please share it with others so his message of kindness and fairness can continue to inspire the world.